And for those who enjoy this channel and would love to support us financially, please feel free to hit that donate link. We'd greatly appreciate it. God bless.
All right, guys, we are live tonight with a really, really exciting debate. We've got a lot of fun today. We just finished premiering my debate with Conspiracy Cats, which was really good, really respectful dialogue. So for anybody who hasn't yet watched it, please check it out. I really enjoyed it. So tonight we have Mark Drysdale, who's been on here before. So thanks for joining us again and giving us your time there, Mark. And John Maddox, of course, who needs no introduction. He's been here many times. So thanks for giving us your time as well, John. We're going to be having just kind of like mostly a free-flowing, informal discussion. We'll have 5-minute introductions, of course, and then just jump right into a discussion. If there are some questions from the audience, though, please tag myself or Brother Neff with your question. We'll make sure that we get to those at the end of the discussion portion. We got Nephilim Free here, who is going to be co-mod. Neff, thanks for joining us, brother.
Hey, man, anytime. It's going to be fun.
Good. Yeah, we're trying. I know the quarantine's getting a little crazy, so we're trying to put on as many debates and discussions as possible. So anyone in the chat too, anyone's interested in debating or has an idea of a debate that they'd like us to set up, just let us know. That's what we're here for. So I'm going to before we go into the opening statements, I want to give the debaters, Mark and John, just a few words of introduction. Maybe tell us what they're doing, how everything's going. Well, let's start with you, Mark.
Doing a lot of sitting around, a lot of hoping. We're, really trying to figure out where this virus is going to end. Is it going to end with herd immunity? Are we going to, wait for a vaccine? Are we going to give up and, just let it, as Trump says, wash over the entire population? We're in a very odd time right now, and my life with the lions and tigers kind of go on as it is. But I don't know if anyone's heard, we've actually got lions and tigers at the Bronx Zoo that have taken on the Corona-19 virus, and that's a little concerning too. We're with the possibility of it jumping to especially felines. It's a little concerning now. Obviously a tiger and a lion are part of the panther family of felines, so it's not your typical house cat, but it's still a concerning jump. But yeah, that's it for me. My life hasn't changed a whole lot, except I don't go out for dinner as much, and going to Walmart is a whole new experience. That's for sure.
I'm with you on that, Mark. Yeah, Costco was kind of wild, to be honest with you. I was happy to be home after that trip. But thanks for staying positive, Mark. And once again, thanks for always, being available for a discussion when we ask you to do so. So, John, a few words, brother.
Yeah. So, in regards to the madness that is currently gripping the world, while I think we all need to be cautious and use logic in how we approach things, I'm actually pretty confident that the intelligently designed immune system that we all get to enjoy is already and will continue to create antibodies and lower death rates and enable all of us to at some point get our lives back to normal. I think the fear or the danger is much less the physiological impact and more the psychological one from the big picture perspective. In regards to what I do here on YouTube, I love having these conversations. I'm looking forward to discussing with Mark the aspects of intelligent design, and over my channel, Logical, Plausible, Probable, discuss different aspects of why it is more reasonable to conclude that we are created by an intelligent agent rather than the occurrence of chance and undirected process.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. What about you, Neff? Any thoughts? How's everything going with you?
Things are the same. Just worried about what this virus is going to do to society, to the world, and it's really impacting us in a very negative way. I'm worried about how long it's going to take for the world to overcome this thing, how long it's going to be with us, how many it's going to affect, and what the timeline of that is. That's really scary. That's my biggest concern right now. But let's put that behind us for the time. We're going to have an interesting talk between Mark and John, and so get your coffee or your tea or your favorite ice, and let's have a good time.
I like the sounds of that, Neff. I got my coffee right here and some snacks. So yeah, this is going to be a good time. Both really good debaters. If you've seen Mark and John, you know that they're very strategic in their approach. So we know this is going to be one to remember. So why don't we hand it over to, I guess, was it John that you're going to start for your 5 minutes?
I think so.
Sounds good. Neff, if you want to start that clock. Me and Neff, we're going to try and stay out of it as much as possible. We're going to remain neutral as always. We're just going to make sure that, it's just going smooth, a free-flowing dialogue. That's what we're here for.
Okay, so. I have a computer timer software application going, so when you start talking, I'll start the timer, and we'll go from there.
Beautiful. It's all yours, John.
So tonight, as Mark and I, undertake this conversation, this debate, it's really my hope to use the gifts that are endowed by our Creator. The ability to speak, listen, contemplate, and hopefully, I will ultimately elucidate my thoughts on evidence, which, in my opinion, can no longer be ignored. That our very existence is made possible only by the actions of an intelligent agent. We have, the things that make life possible are stunningly complex. They have artistic beauty. And ultimately, all of these things, we take for granted are made possible by nanotechnologies that exceed the imagination of humans and, in some aspects, even our comprehension. And as I mentioned, we take this for granted in our daily lives. And it is my strong position that without an intelligent agent, we could not exist at all. As you consider the arguments that are going to be made throughout the night, hopefully the intellectual discourse, I ask that you remove, your personal opinions about religion, what you've been told, bad things that are happening in life right now, fear, and also the shades of incredulity that are often pushed by the opponents of a creator. Review the evidence is one of my favorite sayings. Review the evidence prima facie, and use the incredible ability for reason that's possessed only by humanity. And taking this to the next level, it's my foundational assertion that all variants of Darwinism in relation to our existence, from chemical evolution to modern synthesis, all of which are reliant on dogmatic naturalism and reductionist materialism. And, hey, what's that vibration going on in the background?
I'll stop that. That's one of my cameras actually on my cats. I got a lion that's about to have a baby, so I'll get Tammy to shut that camera off. So I'll still be listening, but I'll be out of the screen for 1 second. It's the only way I can stop it.
Gotcha.
No problem. Yeah, no worries. And even if, I think praise on your end, you're able to mute other people. So maybe we'll just have everybody muted except for the person who's speaking, and then that way we can avoid any background noise.
Okay, I'm adjusting for the conversation here with John's time. John, you got 3 minutes.
Okay. Let's see. Where was I? There are innumerable things that are possible, but no sane person would ever posit they could exist without an intelligent agent as the required catalyst for their inception. On the contrary, to reach this staunch belief for our existence, in my opinion, requires a suspension of rational thought. So to demonstrate this, I want to present 6 arguments for consideration and for things we potentially could discuss. First, every form of life is ultimately dependent on the prescriptive information that is programmed into our DNA. Second, prescriptive information is immaterial and requires a conscious agent to exist, and moreover, the medium which contains this information is not relevant to the source of its origin. Therefore, in its initial creation by undirected physical process, without the action of intelligent agent, is not only neither logical, plausible, or probable, but in my opinion, it's impossible. And that applies whether or not the time available is 1 second or it's potentially infinite. Third, the very existence of our genetic code embodies the reality of the first 2 arguments. While my opponent is likely to claim it's nothing but chemical reactions and maybe has all these errors and fallacies in it, in my opinion, nothing could be further from the truth. It is an unavoidable reality that our genetic code is a multi-layered, interdependent programming code base, unlike anything humans have ever conceived, and are actually currently attempting to copy in a variety of formats. Fourth, the existence of programming logic rules, syntax, if then, and else functions, gene regulatory networks, dual use gene sequences, and the very process by which the data is expressed, in my opinion, again, requires the existence of an author. To conclude that a representative code base could form by chance, let alone an entire system derived from it, is, I think it's fanciful. Fifth, the chemically neutral status of base pair nucleotides renders chance organization of genetic code into a functional information processing system completely implausible. With no chemical attraction prerequisite being present, there is quite literally no explanation for how codon syntax formed, let alone the existence of an organized code-based structure. When this reality is used to review the previous arguments, where's my timer's going off? Where was I? It not only strengthens them all, but destroys the remote possibility of abiogenesis occurring without an intelligent agent. Sixth, and beyond all of the previous, and there's many, many things I go into, it is now known temporal controls are required for the development of life. Indeed, spatiotemporal variation plays a key role in generating diverse cell types. It is now accepted that without these diverse gene expression factors, there could be at most one kind of cell. Therefore, given there are more than 1,000 known cell types, their very existence is evidence of foreknowledge, not random deterministic chemistry. This directly impales the plausibility of undirected advancement without direction. And the creation of information, protein nanomachine technology, self-replication, and all other aspects of life. And it must now also account for the development of quantum technology in some of the earliest, supposedly simplest forms of life. Almost done. In closing, as you consider these arguments and expansion of them throughout the debate, ask yourself this: who is really the one succumbing to a God of the Gaps mindset? Is it those who conclude it is more logical, plausible, and probable that all these things could occur by chance? Or those who argue no matter how counterintuitive it is, you must believe all of this could happen without a designer being required?
Okay, that was about 6 minutes. So, Mark, you have 6 minutes. When you start talking, I'll start the timer. Whenever you're ready.
Is he on mute?
Oh, Mark, sorry, my good man, you're on mute. And we want to hear your opening.
There we go. You're quite the moderator there, Neffy. He takes an extra minute. Instead of stopping him, you just give me another minute. You're my kind of guy. I really do appreciate that. I like people to finish their thoughts. So if we can keep this debate going that way, where we're not really totally guided by a clock, I always enjoy that. I want to hear his thoughts right to the end. So I guess in my opening, what I would say, and I know that he went over 6 points there, and I did write them all down. I don't really want to get into them right now, but I would argue that if we would expect there to be a designer, we would expect there to be a very clear layout of design, just like when we design something. When we design, let's take an airplane and a car. Two very different forms of transportation, but in reality, we could drive an airplane down a highway. They're fully capable of going 100 kilometers an hour. We could take it down the highway. The wings would become very counterproductive, but they would be there. And in all reality, an airplane could it basically work kind of like a car. But would it make sense as a designer? Would we put a set of wings sticking way out the side of a car, drive it down the highway? We really wouldn't do that as designers, as intelligent designers. So what is Mark talking about? Has he been drinking too much? No, not at all. So let's now take this over to nature and look at a penguin, for example. We've got a bird with wings. The wings are useless. And I know my opponent will say, no, they use it to swim. Yes, they use them to swim, but they are still a hollow-winged bird. This bird is still designed skeletally to be a flying bird, but it has lost all of its ability to fly. It has now become, down in the Antarctic, it's had to grow so much of a fat layer to become suitable for its environment. And it has actually gone from swimming, or let's say flying in the air, to flying underwater and searching for fish and eking out a living where it has found a hole in nature. It's not, again, what you would expect to see from an intelligent designer. And we have thousands and thousands of examples like this. We can look at a dog or a cat's foot, and we can clearly see that at one point its heel was on the ground. It's still got a toe that no longer contacts the ground, and we can see that that leg has come up, and now it's become digigrade and it's standing on its toes. We can see that there's parts left over that no longer really make sense as far as an intelligent design. We can move it on to so many animals. We can look at a whale. Why would we have a whale swimming in the ocean that can only breathe atmospheric air? It cannot derive its oxygen through the water. And, again, doesn't make a lot of sense. We're not going to do these things as intelligent designers. So I'll tell you right now, John Maddox will out-talk me if we start talking biology. This is not what I specialize in. What I'm more of is an engineer. I look at the physical world, and to me, I don't see an intelligent design. But with that said, I am really willing to always listen to what my opponent has to say. I'm willing to learn. I'm always willing to learn. I just hope that we don't tonight get into a conversation that is based on probability. Probability is a very, in my opinion, it's kind of a dishonest way to talk. The possibility of anything happening is very small. The probability of me meeting my wife is so minusculely small that I don't even know how many decimal points you'd have to put on the end of that probability, because so many things in this world, in our solar system, in our galaxy, in our universe, had to play out exactly the way it played out for me to meet my wife and to have the kids that we have, that anyone would say that probability is zero. And it really is. If you were to really calculate it out, chances are some point in my life, if I had hit a red light driving home from work, I would have never met my wife. So I don't really like probabilities. I do understand that they're talked about a lot, but I don't think it's a really good argument for why we should think that a God designed what we see, or why nature designed what we see. I think in both cases, probability have their difficulties in explaining either side of our points. So, I'm basically going to wrap it up there. I'm really hoping, that he won't push me down the biology end of things, cell structure, chemicals, all that kind of thing. It's not my thing. I can talk a bit about it, but if that's kind of where the conversation goes all night, I'm not really going to have a whole lot to talk about. I would need a partner for that, but we'll leave it at that. And again, let's have a polite conversation. We're both looking for the exact same thing. We're looking for truth. We're looking for answers, and let's see where tonight goes. And we'll talk about a few things, and we'll go from there.
No, it's that sounds good, man. I don't like arguing the not necessarily with you, but in the past, some of the folks I've debated on your side of the equation, it's very interesting and sometimes can be a circular argument on the probability side. But something I do want to kind of clarify and make sure we're both operating from a reasonable perspective on what is not just hypothetical on what's plausible and probable. Do you think when making a deduction, plausibility should be a strong consideration regarding the use of probability, in determining which conclusion is the most rational and logical? Or do you think, if there is a possibility, then something that is completely implausible should be ignored?
It's a really loaded question. In today's exact time and where we're at in space and everything, is there any probability that we could have found ourselves exactly? So right now in the northern hemisphere, we're heading into summer. Would it be probable that, just through chances and the way the universe was, and I know this is going to sound like a rabbit hole, but could we, instead of going into summer right now, be going into winter? That's very probable. That's something that could have easily happened. Is it probable to me that a God produced, and we are talking about intelligent design, and I'm going to assume that the intelligence is a God or a creator. Is that, to me, the most logical answer? I'm going to say no. For me, the answer will be no on that one anyways, on that question.
I get that's your position. I guess what I'm really trying to define here from the starting point is, because I think in the context of design of life, you don't even have to go all the way to the level of the divine being. That for me, that's a philosophical and a religious discussion. In the context of ID, for me, it's a is there direct evidence for it based on what we are now discovering? And that's kind of what I was saying. Like, I guess what I'm kind of trying to clarify is, is it your position, and this is removing a bunch of things from the equation, just from a foundational perspective, is it your position that anything is possible purely through chance or determinism, or are there things which are impossible unless there is an intelligent agent? And part of the reason I'm bringing that up is, you use the example of, meeting your wife, having your kids, all those different things. And I totally understand where you're coming from. That I have a daughter. I mean, I get all those components of it. However, the things that are have to be applied there is that in the case of my daughter's mother and myself, we were both intelligent agents. There was intelligent life action. Same thing when you met your wife, and then when you have your kids, there were intelligent agents involved. And there's a plethora of things in life, from my opinion, or from my perspective, that would be completely implausible and impossible to have occurred unless intelligent agents existed, and then that completely circumvents any of the improbabilities. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to figure out where you stand on that. Are there things that are impossible without intelligent agents? And anyway, does that make sense?
Well, it does in a way. So I hate to go right to the end of your conversation because it'll sound like I wasn't paying attention to the beginning. But yes, I heard everything you said. But even right away, right at the end, you were saying there are things that don't make sense unless there's an intelligent designer. So I guess my question back to you.
I said, are there things that are impossible unless there is an intelligent agent?
I really can't think of any. Like, there's nothing to me that would. But again, me and you have a different starting point. So, in all honesty, I'm going to tell you, no, I can't think of anything that I see in the universe that would be impossible without a creator, except, and I always give this little caveat, and it's, I don't understand how time got to move forward. That is really my sticking point in trying to think things over. It's the real chin stroker when you sit there and you think to yourself, you understand how time works, you understand how the universe came into be through expansion and through the point where the singularity started to move forward. There has to be an agent, and I really hate to use that word, and my atheist friends are really going to hate me for it, but there has to be something to push time forward, and that's the part that we really don't understand. So I hope I'm not simplifying your question, but yes, I guess to me, the real hard part I have is what pushed us forward, what pushed time forward. And that to me is one that I just, I really do. It's the one that keeps me up at night. And, I'm just being honest with you. It really does. It's a hard one to answer. And I don't know that we'll ever answer it.
Well, to be honest on that, I do want to circle back around to the life on our planet part of the conversation. But in regards to that conundrum that you're mentioning and contemplating, it's one I've pondered quite a bit myself. And to be honest, I think we actually already have the answer to the question in quantum mechanics, but it is a categorically ignored one, and the Darwinism has created the mental escape for the theoretical physicists to circumvent what is staring them in the face, and that is that matter and energy do not exist without a conscious agent. And this is one of my little side interests, and I've read paper after paper on this, many books. I mean, I've done quite a bit of research in this whole deal, and it's interesting. Even up to last year, let me finish one point here. Even up to last year, there have been scientists who've been doing the experiments who have literally made public statements that it is time for us for academia to stop refusing to consider the consciousness requirement for existence. And ultimately, in the context of who pushed forward time, if matter requires a conscious agent in order to exist, then prior to the existence of the universe, there must have been a conscious agent which enabled it to come into being in the first place. And to me, if you extrapolate that all the way out to what we're more talking about tonight in terms of the intelligent design of life on Earth, if there was an intelligent agent required for the very existence of the universe from a quantum mechanics perspective, and we and everything that surrounds us is made up of something that requires that agent, then to me, it is a much more logical conclusion that the design factors that we see but are ignored or try to be explained away by chance, it becomes a very implausible conclusion that
these two paired together,
the intelligent agent who created the universe did not also create life. But that's more philosophical as well as scientific portion of
her book, Daily Life.
Unfortunately, everything really does need to be philosophical, and I do find a lot of these arguments do really come back to philosophy, and again, not one of my strong points, but something that I guess I dabble in. Anyone who talks, I guess, in a way is participating in philosophy. But I would like to point out that I said what pushed time forward. I never said who. I want to just clear that up. It is a conundrum, and it is one for both of us, and it always has been. And anyone who's honest in the world of physics will say this is a tough one, because you've got time and space expanding to the point where it can coalesce into let's say matter. Approximately, I believe the theory allows for about 300 million years before we the radiation cools down to the point where it can start to coalesce into matter. It is a tough one. It's one that no one can answer, and the more we try to think about it, it's what pushes time forward, what created. I guess we can call it an imbalance. What caused? I guess you can call it critical, whatever. But what pushed it past? The point of it being stable as just a infinite density of energy. And but I don't think that's going to serve us well for tonight. I think where I would like to see the conversation go, if it's okay with you, because we really didn't do any talk before this. The audience should know we have had no pre-talk about this. Is what we see, does it look more like an intelligent design, or does it look like it is nature making changes to try to fit into nature? I know it's nature fitting into nature, life fitting into nature, if that sounds a little bit better. And I would still say absolutely not. Everything that we see in nature looks very much like it was designed by nature and not an intelligent designer. But I'm going to throw it back to you to see if you're okay with that, because I don't want to try to guide this this conversation or push it in a certain direction. But I would really like to talk more, down that road. Is it what we would expect to see? Are you comfortable with that? Is that okay with you?
No,
or how would you like to talk about this?
I'm fine with going that direction.
Okay.
However, I would say that your position that it does not appear designed by an intelligent agent is, especially given what I know you do with lions and tigers and bears and a variety of other animals, the level of exquisite functionality that all forms of life contain in a variety of manners, to when you actually look at what is required for those facets to exist, in my opinion, the level of engineering and knowledge, molecular knowledge, chemistry, knowledge of chemistry, information systems, and pretty much every level of manufacturing is required at such a level that to think that it does not require intelligent agents when there are things that are fundamental to existence of life that require spatial and temporal controls to be in place prior to the existence of that life. I don't know how you can come to the conclusion that it's just undirected existence versus design.
Okay. Can I just ask you a quick question? And if you've ever watched me talk before, I'm really not into the aha moments. I don't debate like that. I never try to catch anybody on an aha, I got you, because it's just not an honest way to debate. But if I could just ask you a question, do you, as far as intelligent design, do you get your, for lack of a better word, you get your makeup or recipe of it from the Bible? Do you believe in the Adam and Eve story?
That has nothing. Do I get my scientific conclusions about ID from the Bible? Absolutely not.
Well, okay, but
categorically no.
The only reason I ask is, should we take the Bible? Should we take the Genesis story to be fact? Is that something that, in your opinion, and I know this wasn't to be a talk about religion, but how do we talk about intelligent design without finding out where our belief systems come from? Would you say the Adam and Eve story is to be believed as written? Is it something you believe in? Because if it's not, I don't even want to go down this road. Is it something that you find to be plausible? The Adam and Eve story, the flood story, everything that we read through the Bible.
Ultimately, we're talking about Genesis. Ultimately, yes, but in the context of this debate, I rely zero on the Bible. I actually have spent the last decade searching for evidence completely separate from religion, and part of the reason I went down that rabbit hole, only going through it, I'm often accused of only reading things on creation.com and answers in Genesis. Categorically false. Right. I hardly ever go to those websites at all, actually, and I have purposely gone after information and theories and conclusions based purely on secular information, and in terms of my search for evidence. And so that's why I say, in context of intelligent design, that's why I posited the question to you of, given the insane level of complexity, foreknowledge, and programming logic that is an unavoidable fact now, based on our discoveries really over the last 20 years, is becoming an unavoidable reality, that we have every aspect of life has technology on the nano level that is so mind-bending that it's why I say that it's a suspension of rational thought to conclude that an intelligent agent was not required, when you actually go and look at what is required for life to exist, not just on the macro level, but on the micro level. And when you look at the micro level and then you extrapolate out how the macro functions exist and how they work.
Right.
I mean, when you think about it, like right now, as I'm talking, I'm like moving my hands, right? The millions of chemical reactions, electric impulses, and information processing transfer that is required just to move a finger is stunning. And which is why I say when you go all the way down to the micro level of like, how did this happen? You know, very often in these debates and overall conversations, it gets tied up in just inside of the cell, right? And you, in my opinion, you don't have to go beyond an individual cell to reach the conclusion that a creator was required. But when you go beyond the cell and you look at the extracellular matrix and all the different variables that go into the functions that I mentioned in my opening that we take for granted on a daily basis, even the conversation that you and I are having right now is so mind-bending in terms of the processing that's occurring. When our brains and our nervous systems are so vastly superior to the best systems ever created by humans, it's like, okay, would we ever conclude? This is what part of the reason I asked the question of, are there things that are impossible without intelligent agents? And if we would conclude that the quantum computers, for example, and all those networks that we're creating, if we would conclude that those could never have happened without intelligent agents. But then on the biology side, when we do have quantum functions happening in biology, we have information processing, we have programming, we have all these different variables. How on one side would it be considered impossible, but then when in regards to our very existence, we say that it is completely plausible that this could all happen without direction.
Right. But in reality, though, and again, I don't want to shed a dishonest light on this, but is it really honest to say that we cannot, let's say, build a visual system, a camera that cannot outperform our eyes? And believe me, I do understand that we do see a color range that is absolutely phenomenal. But is it really honest to say that we cannot outdo the eye? We have cameras and we have lenses that can zoom in now to the point where we can almost see a meter square on the moon. Like, we're really getting to the point. We have mechanisms that can see in light that is we have no ability. It would be a black screen to us. We have electronics that allow us to hear down, but just one sec, that allow us to hear things miles and miles away. We have robotics that are far superior in strength to us. Are we really that superior? And I ask you that honestly. Do you really think that our eyes outperform anything that man has made? And we've only been at this for a little over 100 years. Really is when technology started.
Yeah, but Mark, I think you're missing my point, which is potential. To answer your question and address what you just said, are there individual cameras that can have theoretically and in some aspects greater function than the human eye? Absolutely, I don't doubt that.
Depending on.
And beyond that, I know it to be true that there are that can see further, just like the eagle eye has greater function than human eye. That's not the point. The point is that, and what you just said was, we can build something better, but who are we?
Right.
We are intelligent agents.
I understand.
Do something.
Yep.
So in my opinion, in the context of intelligent design versus random chance and undirected process for our very existence, and this is the question I have for you, is could the camera that is currently in your phone that is videoing you and the microphone that is enabling this conversation to occur, could those build themselves without intelligent agents?
No, they're electronic, and it just, and I know our bodies are electronic. I know exactly what you're going to say because I'm an honest person. We are an electronic being. We are all about electronics. That's what our system is, and it's extremely complex. And I agree with you. It is mind bending to just think about the complexity of what we are. Believe me, this is something we struggle with. We don't deny it. Unless we're very dishonest debaters, we will agree with you that there is so much about ourselves that we don't understand. We've got trillions of nerves firing continuously, and we've got a brain that can sit there and figure it all out without us even knowing it's going on. I admit it. It is a very complex system, or it seems it to us anyways, because in reality, what you were saying is true. In a whole, or as a whole, any living mammal or any complex animal, it really is pretty much the top of what we can produce. Like we couldn't come close to producing an entire human being. Robots we're working on them, but when it comes to that, yeah, I'll admit to you, no, I don't think we can touch it yet, and no, I don't understand how we can get to the points where we're at, because there's just so many things in our body that have to be there for it to work. But with that said, we do slowly see evolution, and we do see complexity gaining, and we do, we look at the fossil record and we can see that we gain this complexity. And I don't want to grandstand, so I'll let you step in. I'm sure you have a lot to say about what I just said there.
Well, I mean, at the ultimate root of the complexity is the programming at the molecular level that enables any and all aspects of life, period. And that's the genetic code. And I know, and I think I remember hearing you in a debate you had not too long ago, you were talking about I think you mentioned something to the effect of the DNA is not actually a efficient coding system. And
well, not so much that it's efficient. I think I just said it's more chemicals. Then I know people like to look at it as a very complex code of 4, and we work very binary. It is really, not the way I like to look at it. I like to look at it as chemicals. But yeah, go ahead. I know what you're saying.
Well, I mean, and that's part of, and to be very honest with you, Mark, I think that the whole, I just want to look at it as chemicals position and mindset that you're viewing this from. It may be coming from lack of knowledge on one side, but it might also be coming from a you want to avoid the ultimate conclusion, which is I'm making this supposition that if the genetic code is a programming language, if it has logic rules, if it has spatial and temporal controls that change the outcomes based on external variables on the fly, but are dependent upon pre-existing logic rules, then I would wager that your engineering mind, if what I just said is true, your engineering mind would never conclude that could happen without a engineer being the one to put all of those processes in place with a macro picture of what the intended outcome was.
Agreed. But as an engineer, if I was as intelligent as a god, and the way the God of the Bible is laid out, he would have understood every single problem that his machine was going to come across. And I really don't like the argument that I get from the opposite side that God took his hand off of his creation and has allowed it to run down. So we have a system based on DNA, RNA, DNA, that is very susceptible to corruption, where retroviruses can inject themselves, where mistakes can be made. And it just, to me, it doesn't seem like a system that was really well thought out. If I designed a machine like this, and down the road it was allowed to become as corrupt, and we're sitting here in the midst of a virus, and a virus that has adapted very well. I'm sure you understand even better than I do how well this coronavirus has adapted to go after the lung and the parts
Well,
of
it,
the
well,
lung that keep
quick,
that bubble inflated.
quick
But
interjection on the quick interjection on the coronavirus. You
yeah,
might find it
go ahead.
The Nobel Prize winner who was the discoverer of HIV.
Right.
He actually came forward today and said that this version of the coronavirus is very obviously man-made, and that there are vectors in it that are directly from the HIV virus.
Okay, that's fine.
That's a full sidebar, but
yeah.
But in the context of what you're talking about, and oh, if I were God, why would this happen? I think a few things need to be addressed from the technological level that we're talking about, and kind of comparisons made. And I think it might change your mindset slightly. So, in the context of DNA and its supposed susceptibility to data corruption, right?
Right.
Yes. Do errors happen? Absolutely. But when you actually look at the error rate, it is less than the average error rate in digital information transfer by humans through our computing systems.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Beyond that, in the transcription process and the copying of DNA for gene expression as well as cellular division, in the proteins that do the transcription, there's literally a error correction component. And when errors are discovered in real time, the entire process is paused, fixed, and then starts again.
Yeah.
When there's damage to the DNA external from transcription process, radiation, whatever, there are other types of proteins that go to what has been referred to by the evolutionists, and just duplicate code and all these redundancies that are just junk and so on and so forth. They actually have recently discovered that actually one of the many uses of these things is these proteins go and cut out a piece of this supposedly useless DNA, go back to where the damage was, reorganize it, reinsert, basically do the equivalent of chemical welding to fix it. And it's extraordinarily fascinating nanotechnologies. But going a step further beyond all this, in the context of, is this an example of ultimate design and amazing intellect? I would kind of put this into context of we average life 70 years, right? There is not a hard drive on this planet that's 70 years old. And the average shelf life for a hard drive for significant data corruption begins is about 2 years if you don't turn it on. If you turn it on regularly, it lasts about 5 years. However, if you take the shield that's on the hard drive off, that data gets corrupted in minutes. If you leave it in the heat too long, data gets corrupted in minutes. You get it wet, all sorts of other problems happen. I mean, the point I'm making is the incredibly complex programming that enables humans to exist and the copying, et cetera, happens in so many different variables with a extraordinarily low error rate. And beyond that, the data itself, you take this from things we dig out of the ground, the DNA can remain stable with information for thousands of years. So to say that, just using this as an example, say that's not actually a very impressive aspect of technology and design, I think that's a false supposition.
Well, one thing that I'll do that probably no one else will hear on a debate like this is that I will admit there's one thing that I've always pondered, and that is how, with so much corruption to the code, there is still made a fully functioning, for lack of a better word, animal. So, on my side, I hate to say it, but I'm kind of arguing with you. It doesn't make a lot of sense that we can have so many errors in the in the code that, for lack of better words, builds us, and yet we still seem to be able to produce, or we seem to be able to ignore this corruption. And and some scientists will say that, like, 60, 78, I've heard huge numbers of our DNA is just junk. You could throw it away and still end up with a man or a dog. But there I'm just siding with you. It's amazing, and I don't know how to explain it. I don't know if that it requires an intelligent designer, or again, it just shows that nature has figured out a way to exist. That is a really tough question, and but I'm hoping that from there, I'll let you answer if you could do a short answer to that, and then I do have a question for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, number one, the 80% is junk thing is crashing. I mean, that whole supposition has been becoming eviscerated on a almost daily basis with new papers that come out. There's actually there were 17 papers that were released in unison back in January. I think it was on the 17th.
Right.
I think I did like 17 on the 17th. And if you go, I read all of them, and
right,
all of them were on the supposed junk DNA. And there were more than one in the conclusion of the papers where the researchers who wrote them literally said things such as, I shouldn't use literally because I'm about to paraphrase, but it was, we've got to stop calling it junk DNA. Part of the reason we don't have there hasn't been the development of technology for us to better understand its function is because it's been being called junk DNA and said it has no purpose.
Right.
And that is in the world that we live in, with how strong an argument in favor of evolution and, against intelligent design junk DNA has become, for these researchers to say that in nature is a very big deal. And the evidence is now overwhelming that there is a incredible amount of function in there that is not only relevant, but essential to formation, period, of any form of life. And I can expand on that in a minute, but I'll go ahead and let you ask your question.
Yeah.
Start with that.
Well, I hope that you would look at that and realize that is just an honesty that me and you share. We look at the technical data, and when I say me and you, I'm going to say the honest, I don't know if you're a creationist or what you call yourself, but the honest side of your debate and the honest side of mine is we look at science, we look at these people who spend millions of hours a year looking into this stuff, and we accept their conclusions as being honest. We accept that they're not conspiracies. And I agree with you. If they find that this stuff is not junk and they start to find a use for it, and that's where science guides us, that's what we're going to listen to. And again, I'll let you have a quick response to that, and then I'd like to ask you a couple questions, and I'd like to if you'll indulge me, because I've kind of gone down your road, and which I'm not real comfortable with. Like I said, I'm not really up on the whole biology thing, but I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about the Bible and the way that the Bible says we're designed, and see if see where that kind of takes us, if you're okay with that.
No, like I said, the religious and the philosophical side is not usually the road I go down, but I can do it some. The one of the things I would ask you then, in regards to your opposition to intelligent design, if, per your own admission, biology is not your strong suit, nor some of the things that are considered fundamental, i.e., DNA and the genetic code, in order for life to exist, and the discoveries are more and more showcasing programming, logic rules, syntax, semantics, pragmatics, and upstream, downstream foreknowledge requirements, spatial and temporal controls, in order for life, any form of life, to exist. The question I would have for you is, if what I just said is true, as an engineer, how is it the rational and the logical conclusion that those things and those variables, which are requirements for life, would not require an intelligent agent if in any other context of something you might build, you would laugh at somebody if they said they told you that it just happened by chance.
It's a loaded question. For me, honestly, if we just want to talk honestly to each other, it's how much stuff goes wrong, how bad of an engineer. I know we talked about the complexity and how amazing it is electronically how we work, and how we have all these neurons firing and at a certain speed, and if they don't fire at exactly this exact rate, and it is amazing to start looking into this stuff. And like I said, I barely touch on it because you can't be good at everything. You got to pick things to be good at, and you go down that road, and that's kind of where you go. But I really do look at nature as being a disaster. It is set up for life to kill life. And again, this is where I'm going to go next with you. And I don't want to segment my, or to make my answer move into where I'm trying to go, but it's not the way that if you read the Bible, the Genesis story, what we see in nature is not even close to what is being described at the beginning of what God had intended for nature to unfold as. We're not even close. We're a disaster. We're being beaten down by this virus, whether man-made or not. There's several viruses that are non-man-made that have, over the years, they have kicked the crap out of us, and they've been doing it for thousands of years, not, just the last 200 years. They've been doing it for thousands of years. So, I would say to you, why are we designed like this? Why are we so susceptible to these things? And, I'd ask you to answer that honestly. Why? Why does life need to kill life to survive? And is there any way that we could survive in the way that we're described in the Bible, where life doesn't kill life? We've got a digestive system that is completely designed to break down the proteins and the fats in meat. Does it make sense that we were designed to never, kill life and eat it? And does that make sense? And that's where, for me, that's the real sticking point. It really is. If I could explain this stuff away, I don't know what I could believe. It just doesn't make sense to me.
All right. Well, I'm gonna. Hey, all right, audience. This is a very rare go down the philosophical rabbit hole for me. So stay tuned. So I've actually contemplated this quite a bit myself. I'm going to give you the short version of the conclusion that I came to. So, and the why. So, 7 years, 1 month, and 14 days ago, I found myself in a ICU with a massive brain hemorrhage and being told by neurologists and neurosurgeons that I should be dead. And beyond that, the majority of my hemorrhage was in the Broca region of the brain, which controls verbal communication. So their minds were blown that, well, A, I had driven myself to the hospital, and B, I was being able to carry on a high-level conversation with them and had not dropped dead. And I ended up having emergency brain surgery, saved my life. I came out of it with no cognitive deficits, still able to talk, obviously, and have progressed on since then. That's part of what sparked my interest to go down the rabbit holes, to understand existence and to look for the evidence beyond the religious arguments, and look for unavoidable conclusions that, based on logic, reason, and evidence, that there was more to my existence than the temporal mortal coil. And I went through a bunch of crazy stuff after the surgery, which I won't bore everybody with, but my life took a very blunt turn, if you will. And there was a period of time where I tried to contemplate and figure out and justify, and I went through anger and all the different stages of, like, why would this happen to me? And over the next several years, as I was going through these different experiences, I grew as a person. My knowledge grew, my understanding of existence grew, my contemplation of, what is beyond this life and what is my purpose and what are the things that I can do here. And then beyond that, I also was able to recognize that there was a dramatic variance in perception of the world from people who believed that there was something beyond it and those that did not. And as I thought about the question of why does God allow these things to happen? Why all these bad things happen, right? It suddenly dawned on me one day that just like in physics, everything is relative. And the reason I say everything is relative in the context of what we view as bad is there was one day about 5.5 years after my surgery and all that stuff that happened to me that I had this moment of realization that if I could go back in time, I would not go back and change what I had viewed as a horrific thing in the moment. And where I'm going with all this in the context of why does God allow bad things to happen is that if from God's perspective, this is a blink, this is a very short aspect of our existence because we are ultimately immortal on the eternal scale, then the things that from our current perspective seem so overwhelmingly unreasonable, if it is but a blip in our overall existence and the Creator knows that we are ultimately immortal, then the perspective is entirely different. And in my opinion, is suddenly the things that we're going through are learning lessons, not a being ignored by or the result of inferior design and purpose.
It's really, and I'm not going to use the word funny, but I can't think of another word to replace it. It's very interesting because me and you have a very similar story. I had a car accident in 1989. I had a daughter that was 3 months old, and I ended up in the hospital and laying in traction for, 6-8 weeks. And I got transferred to Hamilton, Ontario. And I ended up throwing a clot out of my leg. They sent me up there to pin me. And it just so happened I was in a room that had bypass equipment in it. And to make a long story short, I ended up dying for 17 minutes. And the next thing I knew, so I was put under to have an operation to start pinning all the bones that were broken. And next thing I knew, I woke up to my entire family standing there. And I honestly remember saying to myself, and again, my atheist friends, may not like the way I debate, but I'm a very honest person. I remember waking up and going, okay, there's my uncle, there's my wife, none of them are dead. Okay, I'm not in heaven, but what the hell is going on here? Why is my entire family, my brother, my cousins, my grandmother, my everything standing here? And I found out I threw a clot and it went to my heart and it killed me. And the only reason that I lived was because I was in a operating room that just happened to have bypass equipment in it, which is, again, we can say that was a miracle. And when I describe it, I do call it a miracle. Do I mean it's a miracle? No, I'm extremely lucky that I was in room whatever that happened to have bypass equipment in it, that they could very quickly get oxygen into my bloodstream while my heart wasn't beating. And I was told by the doctors when I woke up that they were very close to giving up on me, and it was just a nurse that happened to say, let me give one more try, let me just try one more time to save them. And the clot moved on and my heart started beating again. So if anyone out there arguing this side should have found a God, it should have been me. Everyone asked me, what did you see? I see nothing. I remember being asked to count backwards, looking at the clock, and I remember thinking, I think I got to -5, and I fell asleep. And the next thing I knew, I woke up to my family. And I'm sure you'll agree with me, John. It's coming that close to death is something that is very hard on your brain. It's very hard on your psyche. It plays games with you for a long time. It makes sleeping hard for a long time. It makes you ask a lot of the questions that, believe me, until you go through it and just come to the realization that at one point you fell asleep and you may have never woke up, and you don't even know what that statement means. I fell asleep and I may have never woke up. What does that even mean? You know, how can you even comprehend that? And I hope the listening audience can comprehend what both John and I have been through. It's a very tough thing, and it's tough psychologically to really work your way through it. So I really did look deep to what happened. Why did this happen? What's my purpose? How did I come back? How am I so lucky? And I honestly did not come to a God. I ended up being very thankful that by chance I was in the right room, that I had the right doctors, that they didn't give up on me, and that just by chance I was 19 years old, that I was healthy enough to get through this. So, I do understand, and I understand your story, and it's believe me, it's a heartfelt story, and I'm really glad you made it through it, and I hope you're happy for me as well. But we both had a very similar experience, but came to kind of different conclusions because of it. And I'll kind of let you step in, and then again I'd like to go down, if possible, the creation story, and see if it kind of lines up to the what we're talking about tonight. Does it make sense that if we're going to go by the Bible, does it make sense what we see? But go ahead, John.
Well, no, I'm very glad that you survived it. It definitely is it's surreal and forces contemplation of things beyond the average thoughts that most of us allow to consume ourselves.
Yeah, I think both of us will agree that until somebody goes through it, we can tell the listening audience that it really is. It's years and years of nightmares, and just the realization that you could have gone to sleep and never woke up is it's.
But see, here's the. I get what you're saying, but here's one of the key differences. So, and I don't tell most a lot of people this portion of it, but so I went into surgery with no fear. The day before, it's a very long story, but the day before, I had remembered a promise that I had made God my freshman year in college, which was that for a decade I was going to go enjoy sex, drugs, and rock and roll and make a bunch of money, and in a decade I would get my life right and go back walk the good path. And in that decade, sex, drugs, rock and roll, I made a bunch of money, built a multi-million-dollar company, and when my world faded to black, to find out I was having a brain hemorrhage, I had a billionaire sitting in my office, and a billionaire literally pulled my tongue out of my throat and saved my life. However, as I'm laying in ICU, I had forgotten that promise, and it came and struck me out of nowhere as I was laying there. I was by myself. My family and friends had left the room, and I was laying there, and suddenly out of nowhere, I remembered this promise. And I was sitting there thinking about it, and I realized that it was literally almost 10 years to the day from when I had made that promise to where I now found myself in a hospital being told by top-level neurosurgeons and neurologists that I should not be alive. And beyond that, I should not be able to talk. And the greatest skill I've ever had is my ability to communicate and connect. And that's how I've made my money and all these different things. And at that moment, I didn't have some kind of, spiritual conversation with God or anything of that nature. It was a stunning peace that came upon me, and I realized I'd been given a second chance. And not only had I been given a second chance, I had been left with my greatest skill, and fear vanished. Next morning, I had the surgery, and I'll forget, I was being rolled into the OR, and the nurses are saying, "That's going to be fine." They were trying to calm me down, and I said, "No, let's roll. I know I'm going to be fine." And sure enough, woke up from surgery, and I had anger issues after the fact, and
Yeah, me too.
upset about what was happening, but I didn't have nightmares, didn't have fears. I was forced to recognize that there was something I was supposed to be learning from all of this, and not to view it as a punishment, but something that was going to wake me up to a much bigger understanding of life, and to not be consumed by the temporal, materialistic mindset that I had allowed myself to take over my life. And
Right.
now when I look back on it, yeah, cool. If that hadn't happened, would I be living large? Probably. But would I be here right now having this conversation with you? Not a chance.
Yeah.
And ultimately where I'm going with all that is if there is much more to our existence than this life, then why do we allow ourselves to be consumed by things that are finite when there is actually an infinite waiting for us?
Right. But let's do one thing, and let's do this for the audience, because I actually can't get on my computer and see what the live chat is saying. So I'm just I'm saying, before people start saying in the live chat, boy, these two guys just totally agree with each other. This isn't even a debate. They're kind of just backing each other with their experience. Can we, for the end of this, or wherever we're at, I'm on no time schedule here. I'm on lockdown. Can we talk a little bit about the Genesis story? Is that okay with you? As a believer and as a Christian, I'm sure you believe the Genesis story. Are you okay talking a bit about that and see if it kind of lines up with what we see today?
I mean, we can discuss it.
Okay. So my question to you, and it's an honest question, and again, I'm enjoying this conversation. I'm learning a lot off of you. I really am. I honestly mean that. So here's one of the problems that I have as an atheist. So maybe you can clear this up for me. And again, this is honesty. I'm not trying to win a debate here, because I don't even feel this is a debate. It's a discussion. Let's say the Bible is true, and let's look at the Genesis story. So the Genesis story, and correct me if I'm wrong, because by no means am I a biblical scholar that that has the Bible down perfect. I have read it a couple times, and I'll be honest with you, one of those 2 times it was an audio book that I listened to, because I wanted to go back and hear how the Old Testament described things, and seeing if it made sense to me. So let me just tell you a little bit about what's kind of given me my beliefs. And going back to the Genesis story, right to the beginning. So this is the Old Testament. This isn't the King James version. This is the Old Testament, where I believe the Christian religion comes from. Right from the beginning, it is the book that it all started from, and then it was obviously adjusted a bit in the King James version. We've got Adam and Eve, or no, we got Adam. So let's go back to this point. We've got Adam being created, and he's to be the only man on earth. He is to look for an animal as a companion, and not going anywhere with that. Don't care, not going to talk bestiality. I'm not claiming that's what the intention was to be. But in the Genesis story, was Adam to live forever? And if that is the take of what we're supposed to take away from the original Genesis story, are we to understand that there really truly was to be no death on the earth? What is your take on that, and what do we call death? At what point do we do we consider death to another organism? Is it cellular? And again, it's not a got you moment. Is it a complete animal? Can we include plants in that? Where do you see that? And it's just an honest question. It's just, this is something I always think to myself. This is my sticking point.
Well, there's multiple ways to address that. So, number one, if the breakdown of, actually, back up on this for a second. They don't really, even now, don't really understand aging, of why it even occurs. I mean, there's different factors that are starting to be discovered, but they still don't actually understand in totality why we even age in the first place.
Right.
And but ultimately, in terms of old age, natural causes death, right? It's the body just shuts down, right? It gets old and it's not functioning properly anymore, and it KOs, and that's it. Well, if that process didn't happen, right, or you went through normal development up to a certain point and it stopped, and by the way, I won't bore you with all the details, but there's actually significant studies that have been gone into from a genetic level of that it appears that there is existing functions inside of our genetic code that are currently turned off that would actually cause exactly that to happen. If that was the case, then no, we wouldn't die. We would just live. And going another level beyond that, because one of the common extrapolations beyond that is, oh, well, if we're immortal, then where do we go? How do we fit on the planet? Well, first off, humans currently occupy 2.3% of the surface area of the planet, all 7 billion of us. So there's actually a shitload of room for more people, in spite of the diatribes that are issued by folks against saying we're overpopulated. But then going a step further beyond that, in terms of discoveries in science, and what is, one of the arguments that's commonly made by the atheists in regards to the universe, and why is so much of it empty, right? Well, if time is only a factor, and it's only a variable in the context of our mortality. Well, if mortality is no longer in play, then space and distance are also no longer relevant. And if that is true, then the universe actually becomes small and a playground for us to go and explore. And when you think about that in the context of different discoveries that are being made in physics of wormholes and bending space and time and all those things, of being able to go other places, well, the universe becomes small. And going back to my earlier point in context of God's perspective in terms of relativity, right? Right now, things seem massive, things seem overwhelming and unconquerable, but only because we exist in a very finite space. And if that was not how we were originally, nor when you actually look at if you want to go down the religious aspect, you actually go and read Revelation, that is exactly what is going to be the ultimate outcome. Is that will be what is in play. It'll be the immortality and none of the things that we currently whine and complain about. Why do we die? Why do we get sick? Why does pain happen? Why do these things occur? Well, it literally says in the end of the story is that's exactly what is going to be taken away. And we will be able to experience all those things that right now you and many others argue is evidence as to why there is no creator, when the creator has literally told us that is the end of the story. Does that make sense?
In a way, I enjoyed your answer. I really did. And again, it's not a debate. It's not something I'm looking to win. It's a discussion I'm looking to have. I guess more what I was looking at is, if we were to look at ourselves, our digestive system, how we're made, how we're who we are, what you see in us, our very complex digestive system, does it look to you like a digestive system that would ever work in not consuming life? Like, how are we built different than Adam? Or was the next generation, because I take it when God decided that Adam wasn't to be the only individual on earth, he was going to add Eve, and let's leave Lilith out of this, because that's again part of a lot people who study the King James don't even like to talk about the whole Lilith story. But let's just take Adam and Eve and then sin. So now we've gotten to the point where now Kent is a little different. He says up to the point, Kent Hovind, and I think even Ray Comfort and maybe even Ken Ham says there was no that there were no meat eaters until after the flood. I'm not sure. I don't want to speak for you, but that part's not even really important. As who we are, our digestive system, how we have all these acids in our stomach to break down proteins and get what we need out of it for nutrients to live. Does the Genesis story still work? Does it make sense?
Hey guys, little thought here. It's been a long time since anybody discussed design or chance.
That's where we're going right now. Does intelligent
I wanted to intervene, but nobody said anything to me about it, and I didn't know whether I should. I guess I should have held your feet to the fire about the subject of the debate a long time ago. Let's spend some time on that if we could, gentlemen.
The point I just made is actually a great transition back over to ID. So I think the question you actually have to ask yourself, Mark, is how is there a digestive system in the first place? How do the enzymes that you're referring to and the acids and all the other components, how do they exist without the intelligent agent? And this is why, one more point and I'll shut up. And this is why I ultimately always go back down to the genetic code and the information that is required for any of those functions to exist.
So John, are you not in a way kind of making my point for me? Is that we are clearly designed to consume life. If you look at if you look at the entire world of nature, can we agree that our entire ecosystem is based on life eating life? And how can we get from the point, and we're going to kind of go back to my airplane compared to a car analogy. Yes, an airplane can go down a highway, but it's not really designed really well to do it. Again, are we designed the same as Adam? Like if we were to look at Adam's body today, and again, this is by no means disrespectful. I'm not assuming there's no Adam. I'm talking to you adult to adult with all due respect, and I'm going to allow your position that Adam existed. If we were to look at Adam, would his body be the same as ours? And I'm going to throw the word in here, intelligently designed, so that Nephi doesn't jump back in. Would he have been intelligently designed as we are? Or do you think Adam's digestive system was very different than ours?
I mean, I have no idea.
I know it sounds like a terrible question, but
you're missing the entire point of whether or not Adam had a slightly different set of enzymes, which in reality, arguably, there's plenty of evidence. I mean, right, that's a whole other rabbit hole. But the point is that what do we look at today? Whether or not you want to, argue the philosophy and the religion aspect is not relevant to the observations that we have in the here and now, which is our existence is dependent upon nanotech. And I think if you went to any of the people at MIT and Cambridge and UCLA and universities around the world and biotech companies that are rapidly attempting to create nanotech that is anywhere close to the level that is required for all observed forms of life to exist. I mean, I think it's the old saying of not seeing the forest for the trees. Is
Yeah, but is it because
philosophical argument has zero relevance to the deduction based on the evidence, which is programming, logic rules, nanotech are required for life to exist. Do those things require intelligent agents? If so, then from there you can start to extrapolate and go down the philosophical rabbit hole to see which philosophy and which religion you might think is the most reasonable and has the most evidence for it. But in the context of intelligent design, that is not a relevant. I mean, it's a fun discussion. I enjoy having those kinds of conversations, but in context of how are we here? Was it an accident, or was it directed process by an intelligent agent? That is the root question. That's why I said earlier I spent the last decade looking for that evidence, because I wanted to make a rational conclusion one way or the other. And in my opinion, and that's why I keep posing the question to you of, if those things are all required in any other context, as an engineer, would you conclude that they could exist without an intelligent agent?
Yeah, but it's what do you call intelligence? And it's, the problem that I have here is I believe, and again, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I believe you are championing for the cause of the Christian God. Actually,
as I said earlier, when I said I told the audience to pay attention, this is actually the first time I have ever discussed anything to do with religion on any of my debates.
I understand.
So let's just retract that portion of the conversation, because this is about intelligent design, not religion. I went down that rabbit hole with you because I wanted to have open conversation. But
at the same time,
religion has zero to do with my conclusion on intelligent design or the evidence that I'm putting forth in favor of it.
But honestly, though, if you're gonna argue for intelligent design, do you not need to champion a specific intelligent design, or are you gonna say that any of the gods could fit this particular argument, and just you have picked the Christian God? And again, this isn't an aha moment. I really want to know, why would you then pick the Christian God as being the best?
I'm not really sure why that has any relevance to the conclusion of an intelligent agent being required.
Because
as I just said a minute ago, that you can go down that philosophical and religious rabbit hole after you come to the conclusion that an intelligent agent was required based on the evidence. Until you reach that point, going down the religious rabbit hole is pointless. It has no relevance to whether or not the physical evidence is strong enough to conclude that entity may even exist in the first place.
Right.
Which is why I say, in context of what we're talking about right now, and I think ultimately for you, in the context of answering the question one way or the other, if you are going to not address the root evidence of the intelligent agent because you disagree with the Christian God or the Muslim God or any other God that exists in, around the planet, if that's why you're going to ignore the intelligent design arguments or refuse to accept them, I mean, that's you're completely circumventing the process. You're jumping to the end before looking at the beginning.
Am I, though? So I look at it the other way, and rightly so. You would expect me to look at it the other way. I look at it more like, is there anything that we see? So we have and I'll admit it's a basic scientific understanding. We've only been at this now for about 300 years that we've had the scientific method, if even that long. But we have an explanation. It seems to work. And I know you've been asking me this question all night, but what is really and please try to keep, your answer down relatively, short, so we don't run totally out of time here, right? Where is it that the explanation of science really comes to a dead end for you, and you say to yourself, we really cannot explain that? Is it like we talked about at the beginning, just the complexity of DNA and the complexity of man? Or because science says we didn't start out this way, we evolved to this point, and we did it over 3 or almost 4 billion years. I think we went at whatever distance, and then it was really only about 600 million years ago that we started to get into complex life. So I guess if you want to scrub all the beginning, we got about 600 million years to go from a very simple life form to us. And yes, that is a short amount of time to me, but where does the scientific, if you don't want to talk specifically about a religion, where did the scientific explanation really break down for you, and you said to yourself, well, it just doesn't work, there has to be an intelligent designer? I'd love to hear that, and I really hope that you don't feel that I'm sidestepping any of your questions. I just would love to know, what it is that you feel science didn't explain, and you went looking for alternative answers. Is that an honest question?
No, absolutely. I'm considering how to answer it. When you go to the legal term of fruit of a poison tree is one I like to use, because the entire premise and supposed evidence for our existence is extrapolated from a chance abiogenesis. And it is become, the more and more research and the more we dive into how could the first form of life occurred if an intelligent agent was removed from the equation, the more and more it is becoming a ludicrous supposition that is, in my opinion, bordering on desperation to avoid the obvious conclusion. And part of the reason that the very beginning of this, I asked you the question of, are there things that are impossible without intelligent agents? That, if the intelligent agent is in play, suddenly become extraordinarily reasonable. And when you look at the requirements for the simplest form of life, the requirements, not just the individual requirements, but the simultaneous requirements that all have to be in place at the same time, that each one of which is, the probability is greater than the total number of seconds, not in the 4.54 billion years they claim the planet's been around, but for the 13.8 billion of the entire universe. There literally has not been enough time to account for even one of the thousands of variables. And however, just like in the things that we do as humans that would never occur unless we were in play with our intelligent ability to circumvent the status quo, until you insert that into the equation, our existence is impossible, in my opinion. And that's before you even start to go down into the, and that's just from a pure chemistry perspective. And that's before you even go down into the prescriptive information requirements for the genetic code, which is why I say the premise that it is nothing but chemical reactions is naive at best. When we look at what we now know about it, it is anything but. The chemical reactions are the end output and the transfer medium of the information. And unless you want, and I'll ask you this question directly, do you think that prescriptive information, regardless of medium that contains it, occurs through chance or it occurs through intelligence?
Well, it seems like, and here's my answer to that. Science is continually pushing us towards the belief that we evolved. It's not, in the last 100 years, we haven't understood ourselves and biology, and this is millions of hours of work. We're not getting to the point where where science has continually moved us towards a God. It's actually done the opposite. It has pushed us further and further towards understanding. So,
Mark,
I understand I'm not answering your exact question.
Well, I'm asking your. Let's not talk about what academics are saying. Let's talk about you. Do you think that when you are being an engineer and you are creating the prescriptive information for something that you are creating, could the information requirement and the thought process that goes into ultimately creating the schematics for whatever it is that you're designing, does that or could that ever occur unless there was an intelligent agent, in this context you, being in play? I mean, it's a very simple position to address.
Well, no. Obviously, the answer for anything man-made is going to need a man's intelligence.
I'm talking about the information that is being formulated. That information can prescriptive information of any kind occur without an intelligence that is processing it?
I know this is going to sound like a cop-out or a dodge here, but it's what do you call information? Is like if we were and I've said this before in another debate, everything has information. The dimensions, the makeup of a leaf has a huge amount of information in it. Every snowflake on a geometry level has a huge amount of information in it. It would fill volumes of books if we took it down to the Planck length. What do we call information? I guess we really need to define information before we can.
Well, that's why I keep using the word prescriptive. So the type of information you're referring to in crystals is called a compression algorithm, and it has zero. It has complexity, but it has zero prescriptive function, and it is not going to affect a outcome of something separate from itself, and which is why, in the context of computer code, for example, right? So a programming language is okay. I want to do X, Y, and Z if then and else functions, right? That information is then translated into binary through a compiler, right? It goes through ASAC and all that stuff, right? And it becomes binary, and then it's executed. Okay. Well, the exact same process is happening quadrillions of times a day in your body. The gene sequence, which is the prescriptive information of make this happen in this order with these substances, is being transcribed, transmitted, translated, and executed. That is happening it's happening literally billions of times since we've been having this conversation. And the information that's being transferred does not itself, the chemicals that make up the gene sequence do not become the end product. They are translated to equal that end product. So the point I'm making is you now have ethereal, immaterial information that is being transferred. Therefore, that information exists inside of a medium. And where I'm going with all this is, unless you are willing to conclude that immaterial information can be formed by chance. And earlier at the very beginning of my opening statement, I said that the medium which contains it is not relevant. It is the source of its origin. And if we have a code base that is the fundamental foundational requirement for life, unless you are willing to say that information, that prescriptive information that says do this for this, and is translated, unless you're willing to argue that that process in any other context would ever happen by chance, I mean, it's how we can exist and have that without an intelligent agent. To me, that's why I say it's desperation to avoid an intelligent agent being required for our existence.
I do understand what you're saying, but
so how do you explain its existence in us without the intelligent agent?
Without an intelligent agent, how can we have? How do things, like, you're basically asking me, how do biological entities unfold in the manner that they unfold? But would that not mean that we have an intelligent agent getting itself involved in every aspect of biology? It is
no, I mean,
like,
no, you're creating the. I mean, okay, we're creating automated robots right now, right?
Right.
And they have source code and logic rules and account for different variables, and they have specific functions, right?
Right.
We are actively working on machine learning to enable those robots to be able to overcome just their source, like fundamental base functions, right? Well, once you've set that robot loose, are you necessarily engaged as the original programmer? Are you necessarily engaged in every single aspect of what that robot is doing? Well, the answer is no.
No, if we program a robot, we are basically we're confined to the amount of sensors that we can put on that robot. So what we can do is we can ask it to do different activities based on temperature, based on moisture. Like, we have all these different sensors that we can use to pick up what's going on in its environment. And I do know what you're asking me, but I'm
so yes or no, could the robot with those functions ever exist without a designer?
No, I don't know anyone that would argue that a car can exist without a designer. But a car, and you know, again, it's going to sound like I'm giving up on this portion, but I'm not. I'm going to say to you again that cars don't reproduce. Cars don't have this continuous pressure of nature. Neither do robots. We've got this external pressure on us, and it's called nature. And nature can give, and nature can take away, and it does.
Right.
And every time we see, just let me talk just for 1 second here, John. Every time we see nature take away, we see biological entities change. Every time we see nature give, we see biological entities adapt to those different parameters that nature gives and takes away, whether it's temperature, whether it's an ice age, whether it's an abundance of food, whether it's whatever. We see nature continually adapting to nature. We don't see this what we would expect from a God, where we see biological entities like man, if we're going to consider ourselves the top of the evolutionary chain, which I do believe that, you know, most Christians believe. I think most of my atheists believers will believe that I don't believe that man is the ultimate in animal life, but again, I see nature continually adapting to nature, and not just adapting to it, but basically bowing to it and succumbing to it. And that is where, I guess, for me, I really, again, and I hope you don't feel like I went off topic here, but it's more the way I wanted this conversation to go is, do we see in nature what we would expect? It's one thing to say, we're so complex, there must be a designer. Okay, that's fine. I'll agree. There's complexity here, and there's a lot of stuff that we don't understand. But at the end of the day, does what we see in nature represent what we would expect from a God? And I'd really like to go down this road a little bit, if you'll indulge, because I feel like the first, part of this debate has really, kind of, answer. See what you think of what I'm saying.
Well, several things. So, number one, the adaptations that we see in organisms, and let's use humans for example. We are being able to overcome those natural forces. Now,
Are we though? According to the Bible, we've gone from almost 900 years of life down to, if we're lucky, 80.
Hang on. We're talking about life as we see it right this second in context.
Okay.
We're not going down the religious aspect of it. We're not talking about Genesis. We're talking about life as we see it. Life forms are able to overcome natural forces. And every aspect of life exemplifies the ability to overcome the natural forces. Now, in every single aspect do we overcome them? No. But across the board, do life forms do so? Absolutely. Beyond doubt. Now, in context of modifications, and this goes back to why I strongly suggest that you maybe take the time to start going down the genetic rabbit hole, because the things that we are discovering of how are these adaptations actually happening will blow your mind, because it is the direct result of dynamic programming and the ability for those if-then functions to be executed dynamically based on external variables. And we have things like epigenetics. We have, there's so many. I can go off on like a 2-hour diatribe about these different functions that enable the abilities to adapt. It's like, humans. Okay, we go skiing and we go sit on the beach, right? The inside of our cells, when you're overheated, your body goes into a high temp mode, and modifies functions on the fly based on temperature, so that your cells don't die, or so that a protein that's being created doesn't dissolve. And there's also the same reverse happens when you're too cold. It's mind-blowing when you actually look at the functionality that exists inside of every form of life that enables them to adapt on the fly.
Every form.
And this goes back to the whole aspect of robots, right? Eventually, we may be able to program robots to be able to do some of those things, and we're working on it. We're failing miserably, by the way, in terms of being able to, from a programming perspective, be able to make those kind of modifications in as real time as possible, unlike
real time
what our bodies are able to do. And so the point I'm making here is, we have the capacity that is built into the source code and the nanotech that enables life to exist to do those kinds of dynamic variables.
Right.
And which is why I keep going back to the point of, if you saw something that had that capacity, would you ever conclude I'm talking about removing biology from the equation for this example. If you came across a piece of tech that could do that, would you personally ever conclude that, even if you didn't know who the designer was, would you ever conclude the designer did not exist?
No, absolutely not. If you want to compare biological organisms to mechanical organisms, of course not. If you were to, as you know, say that a man is a technical entity, no, obviously not. But we do have an explanation for the biological complexity. And that's what I'm saying. What you're asking me to do is you're asking me to compare a biological entity to something that is mechanical. And no, we will always agree with you that no mechanical entity can exist without human. At this point, it's the only thing that we see that can build something like a car. Like anything, the most simplest of things that are man-made cannot be made without man. We know that.
Okay, so if at the ultimate root, whether it's man-made or biological, it requires chemistry. And
exactly. Well, no, not chemistry. Not everything man-made, requires chemistry, but it does require an intelligence.
Everything requires chemistry at some level. Everything. If you're painting a car, there's chemistry.
Well, if you're going to call things that are made out of metal chemistry, I guess. Okay, yeah. If you want to go down to it.
Okay, when you're welding something, is there ultimately chemical action happening in the bonding that's happening between the steel or aluminum or anything else? Yes, it's inorganic chemistry, but there's chemistry happening. Every single form of anything requires chemistry at some level if there's any kind of bonding that's taking place. And every single function, whether it is man-made, mechanical, or otherwise, has chemistry ultimately at the root. And that is an unavoidable fact. And so going back to intelligent design and ultimately you said, well, we have an explanation for all this. No, we don't. They have no explanation for the syntax. They have no explanation for the first form of life. They have zero explanation for, other than pure supposition, of the formation of the syntax, semantics, and pragmatics in the genetic code. They have zero explanation for the logic gates and the gene regulatory networks and the spatial and the temporal controls that are required for the simplest form of life to exist. And beyond all of this, per their own admission of the evolutionists, going back to the simplest forms of life, per their own evolutionary timeline, they required all of these variables to be in place somehow in order for life to exist. And then, beyond that, somehow, even more complex and more exquisitely detailed and mind-bending nanotechnologies somehow continue to form, and they formed as the result of somehow prescriptive immaterial information created itself. That is what is being presented ultimately in the argument of the atheist evolutionist, is that magically software programming created itself. Then beyond creating itself, it then began to manufacture the machines to create itself. And then those machines started building factories, and those factories built cities. I mean, that is literally what is being argued. And which is why I say, when you look at all the things that are required, unless you're willing to argue that a city could create itself without intelligent agents in place, and the single cell is more complicated than the most amazing city ever built by humans, I don't know how you can reach the conclusion other than desperately circumventing the evidence for an intelligent agent. And ultimately, I think this is why you keep bringing up, you want to discuss the religious aspect of it, is that if you accept the intelligent agent exists and is required for life, then the next step is that there must be or it is reasonable to conclude that there is a divine creator who ultimately I may be accountable to. And that, in my opinion, is what you personally and all the other atheist activists that I've ever debated and I listen to, you're all attempting to circumvent that and escape that reality.
No, I don't know why any of us would want to remove that reality. We're just like you. Everybody has that inherent fear of death, and I don't know. For some people, for myself, it's not so much a fear; it's just a realization that one day I may not be here. So I'm just going to disagree that I don't really have that view, although it is something that I do think about. So I guess I'm going to say to you is that if we were to both agree, okay, let's just for the argument of this debate, we agree, okay, there's an intelligent designer. How do you then make the jump to the point that it's a Christian designer, and not only is it a Christian designer, but this was all designed, and then there's a final goal that we get to live on forever in eternity, and the people that do not believe, and I hate to turn this conversation into, taking it down to this level, but people like me get to burn in hell, and the Christian God is the God. How do we get to the point where we decide who this intelligence is and argue for that? How do we jump that far? So let's say there is somebody who has intelligently put this whole show together, this whole biological show. The universe has become aware of itself through man. We are the only life form in the entire universe that has become aware of itself. So we are it. We are the final. This is us. This is exactly what God had planned. Whichever God we decide on, how do we make all these big jumps? And I do admit science makes a lot of jumps too. So, in admitting that everybody has to make jumps, how on your side, help me make some of these jumps that we need to make to all of a sudden take it to that we have a creator who cares about us, that wants us to come and live in a heaven with him. And I do say this respectfully. This is how I talk. I try to be very respectful to the people that I'm speaking with, because I do learn all the time. So I'll pass it back to you. How do we make this jump? And, for people like myself, how would you guide us into making a jump that there is a God, and then how do we pick which God we want to follow, and just how do we do that? What is the mechanism we use? And, it's just a real tough jump for me.
Well, I mean, ultimately, that's a question you have to answer for yourself. But I would say step number one would be to ask yourself, as I've said multiple times tonight, is the evidence of design obvious?
I'm going to give you that. The obvious. I'm just going to.
And if it's out, and then beyond that, so you can see that point. So you go beyond that.
I'll concede it. Okay, let's just say for the sake of argument, I'm going to say we need a designer. How do we get to the Christian God to allow us to believe in this religion where man is the final example of what this whole universe is about? This entire thing that's almost 14 billion light years across. How do I make this jump? It's hard for people like us to do that jump. Maybe you could, help the audience, help, my side in a truly honest way. I am not, again, trying to be disrespectful here. I am honestly asking you, how do we make this jump? How did my wife make that jump? How do we do this? Like, it seems like a big jump for me, but for some people it seems like such an easy thing to do. Why is that? Why is it so easy for some people, and for people like myself, we just can't go there? It's so hard for me to be honest. I have to be honest with myself, and I can't take that jump. And why is that? Why do you think that is? I know this doesn't sound like a debate now. It sounds like more of a question period, but I'm being totally honest with you.
Well,
How do we?
one of the I'll put this sort of back as a question to you, but one of the things that I have thought about quite a bit in direct context of what you're talking about is, why do so many people who view the evidence and agree that it's obvious, but then seem unable to cross that line? And what I've thought of quite a bit actually is, okay, at this point, I'm guessing for no less than 20 years, you have told yourself there is no creator. And you're what? You're 50?
Yeah, 52.
52, okay.
Hey guys, got a couple of minutes, and then we're going to go to question and answer. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. If you can just give us 5, I think it's 5-2 right now. 5 would be great enough.
So if you have spent, and I'm not going to apply this to you, I'm going to apply this to you, some of the most hardcore evolutionary biologists, for example. Some of them, even in their in their 80s, have done a paradigm shift and said, you know what, I have avoided the obvious, and I've refused to accept what I know to be true. And why is that? Well, if you think about it, and if you have spent, I'm talking about from the professional standpoint, if you spent your entire life or adult life adamantly arguing that there is no God and refusing to accept that there is one, and telling other people that they are wrong, you have then entrenched that premise into your own mind. And if you view existence as being nothing more than this mortal coil, then if you do the paradigm shift, and there is nothing else beyond this life, then you have just negated what you have spent your life fighting in favor of. And I think, especially as people get older, and they see, hey, I'm on the tail. I'm not saying you're on the tail end, but I'm no longer on the young side. I'm approaching the old side, right?
Right.
My time left is short. Then I think it becomes harder and harder to escape that worldview, because to do so means that you've been wrong for the most of your life and negated it. However, if you operate from the perspective that, hey, the time in this world and this body is but a blink of an eye in my total existence, and you know what, I was wrong, and I'm glad now that I see that there is more to my existence than this. In my opinion, it then goes back to the whole aspect of relativity, right, and perspective. Suddenly it becomes much easier to take that next step, because I'm not negating my entire life. I'm actually opening myself up to my eternal future. And that whole change of mindset and that relativity of perspective takes on an entirely different form. And then suddenly the evidence that's been staring you in the face becomes not only obvious, but the only real conclusion to be made. And then you begin to philosophically consider the premise that, hey, all of the things that I've been telling myself, that why would any God allow this to happen and these bad things to happen? Well, hey, it's just like as a parent, when I watched let's rewind. So back when our kids were in diapers, right? They screamed and cried. And hey, we went and changed the diaper and it was all well. But we knew it wasn't the end of the world for the kid, right? And that extrapolates out to falling off the bike for the first time, first love, broken heart, and so on. But it actually keeps going into adulthood. Every moment we're alive, something new happens, some good, some bad. But as parents, we don't necessarily stop or prevent every single bad thing from happening because we know our kid is going to survive. And which is why I say, if from God's perspective and the Creator's perspective, we are ultimately immortal, then it's the exact same as allowing things to happen to the child that we do as parents. From the kid's perspective, why would mommy and daddy ever let this happen? But when they become adults, we'll look back on those experiences and laugh of how worked up they were at that moment because they had never gone through it before.
Right. And then if I could just answer this really quick, Nephlin, and then we'll
go ahead and answer that, Mark, and then we'll do Q&A.
So I guess for me, I just have a couple things to say, and you started, so I'll finish off, and I'm not going to leave big things hanging because it's just not my style. I guess kind of my answer to that is, again, we see nature meeting nature, and we see nature filling every single hole that exists. So, he just did a really elegant closing there, and I hate to go back to this and kind of hang us on this, and I would love to talk to John again. But for example, we look at parasites and we look at viruses, and we just see that every time nature is given a hole to fill, it fills it. And I guess for me, and I hate not to answer a lot of what he talked about there, but we're just really are on a short amount of time here. We want to get to the questions and answers. Is that I don't see where the original design that I read in the Bible, and I know John, and I'm going to be respectful of what he said here. He has said that he's not here to argue for the Bible, and he's caught me a little off guard on that because this is the first time I've actually heard that. But if you really look at the way you read Genesis, the way life was put together, the way man was to be put on earth and dominant over the animals, we are the furthest thing of dominant over the animals. Again, I'm not going to say virus is an animal. It's not even really considered a complete life form, but you've got parasites that can attach to us and can eat us. And I don't want to leave this in a way that John doesn't get to respond to me, or this will never end. But I guess kind of, my point is clearly John has a better understanding genetically. I will concede that, no problem. He understands this stuff. He's really looked into it, and it's stuff that I really hope he's going to email me. And he's made some really strong statements tonight that, Mark, you need to start looking at this, and I'm going to make sure he has my email address at the I'm going to send it to him, and I promise you I'm going to read this, and I would love to talk to him again. But I guess we're kind of approaching this in two different directions. And then the last thing that I'd like to say is, and I'd like John just to answer this with a yes or no, is and I don't know if I'm an atheist. I really don't know. That's a tough word. That's got an absolute statement to it. You do not believe in a God, and I've always said that I don't believe in absolutes. So I think atheist is a little bit strong of a word for me. I don't know if anyone can claim that there is no God. I think that's a very arrogant thing for any man to do, and I don't believe I can do it. But right, I would say that I'm going to wrap this up in 15 seconds. I'm just going to ask John, and then I'd like him just to answer me real quick. Is I have, and I think I speak for most atheists, if not all, and agnostics, is, do you think we have an agenda to not believe in, and I don't mean the Christian God, I mean any God, that we would have a reason not to want a God? Because believe me, we're not sinners. We're most of us are great people. We love our fellow man. We hold no animosity, even though sometimes we'll argue with the, what seems like hate in our voice. But is there really, I sometimes feel that when I debate people like Kent, which I don't get from you and standing for truth, and even Nephilim here, I don't get that hate for each other type feeling. Why, what would make you think that I wouldn't want to believe if I could find any evidence? Do you think that we just don't want to believe, or do you think we hold evidence maybe at a slightly higher level, a lesser level? What do you think? And then we'll go into question and answer.
Well, I actually kind of addressed the first part of your question there directly before you asked it, in context of avoiding it and not wanting to accept it because of negation of life experience and life actions. But honestly, I think it becomes a refusal to consider the evidence that crushes your your worldview position of there being
right.
no God.
Right.
And which is why multiple times throughout the conversation tonight, I've asked you, as an engineer, would you ever conclude that something that had programming designed for knowledge or had components that required foreknowledge of the ultimate outcome in order for it to exist, would you ever conclude that an intelligent agent did not exist to create it? And you've
no, and my answer to that has always been no. It could not exist. But my argument,
that's my point. Hang on, and that's my point, and we'll wrap up your other questions. And that's my point. Is in any other context, except for the single most important one, which is how are we here, even though we require components that are vastly superior to anything that humans have ever created. If you say that the things that we've created couldn't exist without us, why would you conclude that the things that enable us to even ask that question could exist without there having been a creator for them? And I think we go to Q&A now. We've been going for a while.
Okay, guys, let's. I'm impressed.
So if I could just have 5 seconds, Nephilim, what I would ask is maybe if John and I could have a discussion, and I think honestly the audience is probably a little confused on the way tonight went, because again, it wasn't so much an argument as two people having a talk, and in some cases conceding that we got to both go back and think about it. Maybe they could guide us into a topic, and I would love to continue the talk. And I'm going to re-listen to this, and I'm actually going to contemplate a lot of things that he said and look into a lot of things that he said, and I'm hoping to get some emails from him. But again, thank you so much, John, and let's go into question and answer. And I know right now I'm in the lion's den, so I'm sure a lot of these are for me, so let's go.
Well, Mark, you stepped into the den of sheep, and we're just going to tear you apart with the love of Jesus Christ.
Okay, let's do it.
So I'm surprised and delighted by how cordial this discussion was. Both of you guys, my hat's off to you. So let's move to questions now. All right, so Bill Morgan has a question for Mark. What exactly is nature? Can I touch, see, or smell nature? Does nature have an IQ? Can nature design sexual reproduction? I'm going to paste it into you can't see in the text yet, you said, Mark.
Yeah.
I'll read it again, okay? Let me read it again.
Yeah.
Okay, this is from Bill Morgan. He asks, what exactly is nature? Can I touch, see, smell, or hear nature? Does nature have an IQ? Can nature design sexual reproduction?
Okay, let's start backwards. As far as sexual reproduction, it looks like that is what nature is. And in my opinion, not sexual, because there's many forms of sexual, not just looking at it as a male and a female getting together and making a baby. We know there's several ways for nature to reproduce itself, but I would say that is the definition. He kind of summed it up at the end. Nature is something that can produce itself again through reproduction, and then not only reproduction, but modifications through reproduction. So yes, that is kind of the definition of nature, is a reproduction and then a movement forward, with with the advancements of the reproduction, the two, or whatever the case may be, of genetics joining and pushing nature forward. I kind of hope I'm answering his question, but he kind of answered it at the end. Reproduction is what it defines nature from things that are mechanical. Again, we don't call a car nature because we don't park our truck beside our Jeep and end up in the morning with an SUV.
I guess what Bill is asking here is, how do you discern what's natural and what's supernaturally made?
Well, I don't think he's asking about supernatural.
Is there anything like that? Hold on.
Yeah.
Is there anything like that in your question, Bill? Because he's asking, what is nature? Can I see, touch, or smell nature? Is nature a substance? He asks again, nature. He says, if nature is reproduction, does reproduction have an IQ? Okay, he clarified it. If nature is reproduction, does reproduction have an IQ?
Yeah, I don't know what to say about IQ. To give something an intelligence level, do I think that a tree has an intelligence level to be nature? No, I hope I'm not dodging his question. But for me, nature is anything that we consider alive. That is what I'm speaking of nature. When I talk about nature, I'm not talking about the wind. I'm not talking about the clouds. I'm talking about the things that are alive, that are reproducing, and that are evolving. So again, I hope nobody feels I dodged that question, but we can only spend so much time on it. Maybe John could if he feels I misanswered this, maybe he could help me along here.
Well, I don't think you're misanswering it from your worldview.
Right.
I think you're misanswering it from the perspective, because I think ultimately what Bill is asking is, was there IQ required for that reproduction to be possible?
Right, which is another way of saying intelligent design, or was there intelligence involved? And again, I guess if you
and quick interjection here, it's a very standard response from the atheist worldview that the reproduction factor is somehow the be all end all for
it is
the purpose.
Yes. And I will admit it. I will admit it on our.
And this is why I would strongly suggest you go and actually research on the genetic level what is actually occurring in the zygote.
Right.
Your mind will be blown at what is actually happening, and how it basically takes it back to a blank slate for all intents and purposes.
Right. Let's move on to the next question, gentlemen.
Yeah, and if you send that to me, I promise you I'll look at it, John. I really do. And I will admit, that is our you're right, it's our be all and end all. It's all about evolution for us. It's all about reproduction with advancement, to sum it up. It really is. He didn't misrepresent my view at all. He's dead on.
Okay, another question from Mark. I was not able to capture in the text yet who asked it. The question is, name one design made by nature that man has observed. Name one design made by nature that man has observed. I guess what man has observed nature design something. What would that be?
Well, everything that we see, we consider nature has designed it. Like that's again, I will be honest with you, that's my worldview, that we see reproduction with advancement. For to sum it up, we're constantly seeing things adapting. It's all about adaptation, and that's, again, I don't know how to answer that, and I don't want to be disrespectful to the person asking the question, but I'll be honest with you, I don't completely understand what he's asking me to, to say.
Okay. Snake was right. Bill asks, oh, wait a minute. No, that was, okay. So Chris Keith asks Mark, how does he know the eyes don't see anything? Ask him if he knows what the visual cortex is. How does he know that eyes don't see anything? Ask him if he knows what the visual cortex is.
Boy, you can really tell that we're up to about what, 1:15 here with some of these questions. I'm really fighting to understand. I wish he'd asked me how I know that we can mechanically outdo our eyes or something like that. I'm not sure what he's asking me, and I consider John to be my friend now. John, am I missing something? How, do you know what he's asking me? Am I misunderstanding it, or?
Neff, can you read the question again?
Okay. Ask Mark, how does he know eyes don't see anything? And he puts "see" in quotations. Eyes don't, quote unquote, see anything. Ask him how he know if he knows what the visual cortex is. So I guess what the question is this: if there's no ghost in the, maybe I'm wrong. This is what I get. If there's no ghost in the machine, then the eyes themselves, you have to allude or some way the seer themselves, and not the spirit that animates the machine.
Right.
So I think this is what the question is alluding to.
So
the theist has to believe that the eyes are a conduit to the the world through vision, right? They allow the spirit to see the world around us, but the atheist or the evolutionist has to believe then the eyes are nothing more than cameras connected to a computer, and there's no body actually at home. I think this is what I'm getting from the. So, if that were the case, then you would have to say that the eyes are seeing, themselves are seeing. There's no ghost in the machine. It's the machine that's seeing, and not the ghost in the machine. I think this is what he's getting at. So he's asking, how do you? What is your reason for believing eyes actually see? The machine itself sees, and not a ghost in a machine.
Yeah, that's it, way above my pay grade here. I'm, and I kind of heard John there struggling to interpret what he's asking, and I guess we can question every one of our senses, and and I think we all do. We've all wondered, do we all see this in the same color? Do we all see the same things? It's something we've all questioned, and I guess we do have to question what we think we see, and question the processor that's behind it all. And again, I don't want to I don't want to feel like I'm not answering these questions, but boy, they're I'm just having a little bit of trouble understanding them. And I think John will agree with me that some of these are a little oddly asked.
Okay, so let's move to the next one. Seems like, Mark, you're getting all the questions. It looks like all
I know. I expect them.
Okay, so Redefine Living asks, asks Mark, if your life is just chemistry, how do you explain your out-of-the-body experience? And because it was supernatural, how can you rule out God? So how do you explain your out-of-body experience? I guess this is assuming you've had one, and because it was supernatural, how can you rule out God?
Yeah, I'm gonna be 100% honest with my fellow man out there, and I've always said that if man didn't lie, we could know so many things.
Mark, have you said? Let me interrupt you a second.
No, I never had one.
Have you? No. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Have you ever said that you've experienced anything that could be likened to an out-of-body experience?
It was 17 minutes, and it was honestly, I still remember looking at the clock, and my countdown started at about 17 seconds after, and I made it about 5 seconds counting backwards, and then I was awake, and that was 17 minutes. I was actually considered clinically dead. They had given up on me, and I had no out-of-body experience, but that is not to say that I don't believe that people have a lot of brain chemistry go on when they die. But you got to also remember, right, I was sedated, so that's a little bit different of a situation to die under sedation and to die under a non-sedated brain might be two different things. I will always give you that because I didn't see anything, I've always attributed that to the fact that probably my brain chemistry was very much subdued. I don't know what other word. It's 1:15 here. I was under, obviously anesthetic to be put asleep.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so next question from Mark, of course. Anthony Maurice asks, are you aware that the origin of life experiments are highly flawed and require controlled laboratory environments that have no relevance in the natural world? Every step is controlled by chemists.
The problem with that statement is, and I've heard it a lot, is that really, if you were to look at the entire Earth as a petri dish to start life, we have billions and billions of different scenarios that we can put together. We have caves, we have underwater heat vents, we have puddles, we just have so many different things. We don't just have, we don't look at it like it all started in the oceans, period. We all came from rocks. No, we just know that there are so many different places that life could have started, that I don't think we can make the statement that that life just couldn't have started in the ocean, plain and simple, water, lightning, here you go. I think the primordial life started on an Earth that just had a lot of different, for lack of better words, petri dishes set up. And, that's just kind of how I view it. That's, from what I know, that's kind of how I view how life got started.
Okay. All right, so go ahead. You can comment about it.
I mean, that subject is a whole other debate, specifically on abiogenesis. But I'm just going to take quote from Richard, where he said, "It is not easy to see what replaced the flasks, pipettes, and stir bars of a chemistry lab during prebiotic evolution, let alone the hands of the chemist who performed the manipulations. And yes, most of us are not comfortable with the idea of divine intervention." I mean, the requirements to circumvent the natural forces, and again, Mark, this is worth an entire another 2-hour debate. Particular subject. And I pick this back to going down the rabbit hole. I think this is another one that I would strongly recommend you go down, along with genetics, because when you actually look at the requirements and what they say in their own papers, I honestly think if you actually open your mind and contemplate what is actually being argued, you will come to the same conclusion that so many other people have, atheists, academics, PhDs, all this kind of stuff, because very often they are operating, I think, just like you, from the perspective that all this stuff is, solved and figured out. But when they actually go and read the papers for themselves, they're like, wait a minute, this is what's being argued?
Yeah.
Well, your guys are out to lunch. That's nuts. And suddenly they take an entirely different worldview.
Okay, so the next question is for guess who? It wouldn't happen to be Mark, would it? This is from GER Television, and we're on television tonight, folks. The question is, how the oceans were formed. Love that theory tale, he calls it, before bedtime. Love that theory tale.
Yeah, well, oceans, and again, I don't want to insult anybody, so I'm not going to attack his question, but the oceans are formed by their low spots, and again, I know this sounds like I'm being disrespectful, But if we look at all comets, they're so jam packed with water. I'm not sure. We would expect the oceans to form in the low spots, and we would expect all the water that we see in all the comets to release themselves.
Well, the question seems to beg asking, what's the plausibility that all the water that's on the Earth just happened to have been brought here by comets that would bring so much water here?
Yeah, but that's
so
all
little elsewhere else. I think that's really at the heart of that question, don't you?
We don't see so little elsewhere, though. That's the thing. Where we see little water is on planets where comets have formed, and concretions have formed these planets, and then the atmosphere has been boiled away, and we don't see water particularly on planets. But where we don't see atmospheres, where we don't see places where the rocks have released their water, it has become part of what's the word I'm looking for? Ecosphere, and then the water boiled away. We see massive amounts of water in comets. This is something we see every day when we see comets. We can detect the amount of water that's in them, and water is very, very,
Well, I don't think the question's getting at how much water is in a comet. I think it's going to the plausibility that so much of it would be brought to the Earth. So many comets, because it would take, even if you posed that the comets were, ginormous, right? It would still take one incredible number of them to fill the oceans of the Earth. I think that's at the heart of that question. What's the plausibility that so many of them, regardless of how big they are, and they can only be so big, reasonably, they would bring so much water to the Earth. I think that's
I guess what you'd have to look at is how much water do we find when we look out into outer space. And again, I don't think John would actually argue with me here. I don't think he thinks that the oceans were just miraculously invented. I think if we were to look into outer space and we were to look at not just comets, but all the space rocks that are out there that haven't, like I said, already been melted down, and then the water released into an ecosphere, like a atmosphere like we have on Earth, and then boiled away, like in the case of Mars. I think the amount of water, and again, I'd have to look it up. I'd have to see what the average comet carries for water, but I don't think those numbers are going to be too far out of what we would expect if the Earth was created by a pile of comets hitting the Earth. There isn't actually, compared to the amount of rock we have on Earth, there's not really that much water if you really look at it.
I'd have to disagree with you on that for multiple reasons, but one primary one. In the last, I'm pretty sure it's been in the last 3 or 4 years. I forget exactly when I came across this, but there is actually more. They've discovered recently with new seismic imaging technologies that there is greater volume of water under the Earth than
I agree.
Above it. So
I agree.
There's 6 miles deep of water on the Earth. The oceans go 6 miles deep.
Well, no. The point, I agree with you on that. But the point I'm making is, so it's 74% of the planet's surface area is covered by 3 to 7 miles deep of water, and then below the crust, they have recently discovered more water than is on the surface of the planet. So
I agree.
I don't really think that comets are a viable origin of water that is under the crust of the Earth, and in a greater volume than on the surface area. So
okay, okay, go ahead, Mark.
And there is a simple answer here. What I would recommend is everybody look into what the mass the understanded mass of say a comet and what the percentage of water is. Work out what they figure the Earth weighs and see if that percentage is even close. It's something I've never looked into. Again, I guess you'll just you'll say that I take it on faith, but I've always just assumed that the amount of water we have would correspond really closely to what we see in water content in a comet compared to the I don't want to call it a rock, but compared to what we see in the solid part, the non-water part of a comet, I guess is the word I'd like to use.
Okay, so we're down to 2 questions left.
Good.
Question from Mark from Thermal 15. What explanation has the most explanatory power for why there is something instead of nothing?
Oh, no, that's not the end of the question, please. That's $1 million question. Why is there something instead of nothing? I think both John and I, anyone who's honest with their own mind, this is something we struggle with constantly. We all struggle with this. Why? What is this all about? I think we all share this struggle. It's I don't think there's any dishonesty here in this debate whatsoever. We all struggle with why are we here? And I agree. This is quite the show, and I'm glad I'm part of it.
Well, the purpose of life, of course, is to eat chocolate ice cream and salsa and chips.
Hershey bar for me tonight.
All right, so last question is from Moshi, and it is, what is the origin or source for the immaterial information in biological systems? What is the origin or source for the immaterial information in biological systems?
Philosophy. What do I say to that? It's what do we call information? We can put the word information onto anything that we see. And again, I don't want to dodge the question, but and I really hope John, will answer this at the beginning, because he might have a better answer than me. But I really have trouble with the word information. I think you can take a lot of debates, and a lot of them are really how we interpret what we consider information, as in something that had to be designed in, compared to something that just happens. And again, I know it's going to sound like I'm dodging the question, but I would argue that a snowflake, every snowflake of the trillions and trillions that have fallen on Earth, all contain a lot of information.
So I think a lot of people are going to disagree with your definition of information on that, but I'm willing to leave it at that, because this is your debate, not mine.
Let me address that one. So the Oxford definition of information is what is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement of or sequence of things. And ironically, they have, as an example, they have genetically transmitted information. But I think the important component to consider here is what is prescriptive information. And you're right that from a pure physics perspective, yes, information has its foundational structure. But whether or not the information implies or conveys meaning, prescriptive or descriptive, information is the root question here. And
I was just going to say, it really is the root of this whole debate. It's, it really is the root of the debate. What is just happening? What is just through literally chance, the formation of a snowflake? I think we all agree there is no hand of God. I think we all agree that there's no hand of God designing that and making sure that that particular snowflake falls that way. I think we all agree that just when water freezes, it will form that shape. I think, and then on your side, if I'm understanding right, is that there's a belief that this complexity, this ability to think things through, the things that make us human, the things that make us not snowflakes, is really where the question lies. And we all fight this. We really do. We all sit up, us thinkers, us people who just constantly think. It's what we struggle with. And I know John does too. I've heard it in his voice many times tonight. He's agreed with me, yeah, that keeps me up at night too. And
but Mark, one of the things you have to ask yourself is stepping aside from the debate we're having right now.
Right.
Does prescriptive information exist? And beyond that, would you say that prescriptive information is, and the requirements for its origination are categorically different than the information that is in a snowflake?
Yeah, exactly. And I have to honestly say the part that makes this an argument is that so in all reality, humans are a self-aware, self-reacting a snowflake, for lack of better words, and please allow me to say that can make decisions that can alter its outcome. And in that sense, I understand what you're saying. We have definitely become I know exactly what you're saying, as just a piece of nature.
Can prescriptive information be created without intelligence?
I know what you're saying, and I'm going to say yes, it has to be.
Okay,
because I don't see there being a God. I don't see that. I just see that.
Neff, give us like 2 seconds here.
Yeah.
If prescriptive information, I said remove God from the equation. If
right.
prescriptive information requires intelligence, and you're agreeing with that, and for any form of life to exist, prescriptive information is a fundamental requirement. How is it a remotely logical conclusion that the reasonable conclusion is not that there was an intelligent designer who is required for the prescriptive information to exist? To me, any other conclusion, if you are going to agree that in any other context, prescriptive information requires intelligence. And this is why I keep saying to you, Mark, I think you are actively refusing to answer the question, truly answer the question. I'm talking about in your own mind and your own heart of this, because if you answer this question in the logical outcome, you will not be able to avoid the conclusion that a creator must exist.
See, the difference in the way that we think is that I believe that through evolution and through advancement of evolution, we have gotten to the point where we can think, that we are thinkers. We are people who can ponder things. And if you compare us to, like you say, a snowflake truly is a representation of nature, if you look at it that way. But we're talking about living nature, all the way from, I consider plant life to be basic life. Some people may disagree. I don't know. I consider plant life to be the most basic form of life. And then again, if we want to consider humans or mammals to be the ultimate example, I know exactly how you're asking this question, but again, I would say back to you that I just don't see how our intelligence and our admittance that the things that we make could not be made without our intelligence would circle back to that we couldn't be made without another intelligence. And that really is the circular argument here, is could we be made without an intelligence? And that's the hard part for me. And I hope I answered the questions, and I hope I answered John's question. I don't think I did, but that's where I struggle, is in the belief that we couldn't have been made without another intelligence because we can only make things with intelligence. Does that kind of make sense, or do we need to pick this up?
Let's save this discussion for another night, you guys. If you guys want to have another discussion,
I would love to, and I would love John to send
it.
me some links so I can do some reading. I really would. I honestly mean that. I've enjoyed tonight immensely. He's a very nice person to speak to, and I know a lot of people that tune into these expect insults to be flying back and forth. Not my style. If you want to see me insult, go back to my flat Earth thing where I lost it there. I honestly thought they were trying to insult me, but I found out these people actually believe the Earth is flat. So I'm really glad to have a civilized talk again, because I lost my shit. I couldn't believe what I was part of.
Hey, remember, there's nothing to fear but the sphere itself.
Exactly.
Well, let's just say that I am extraordinarily glad that I was unable to make it to your debate this past Sunday with Erica.
It was bad.
I'm glad you weren't there.
And I'm still. And if James is still in the chat, please take my name off of that video on TV, because I do not want to be associated with those nut jobs that were. I was able to, Mark.
You couldn't pay me enough to team up with those guys.
I didn't realize the guy was. I knew he was a little bit weird, but I was like, hey, whatever. We'll be able to have still be able to have a rational conversation. And then when I finally got home and tuned in for the second half of it, Erica was like, I just don't know if this is at any point in going further on this.
Yeah.
Mark only the dog cuss him. I was cracking up. It was like, well, I'm glad I missed this one.
There's only one idea about the Earth that matches flat Earth as nutty, is this hollow Earth idea. There are some people who actually claim the Earth is hollow, and there's people living inside there with civilizations all over.
That sounds like a pretty cool science fiction.
The reptile species lives in the hollow Earth.
If I can say one thing though. You've seen how I reacted to the flat Earth debate. It was, and even Erica, it was very, very negative. It was very hateful. I've never acted like that before. I was actually saying, would you shut up, you moron? I'm just done here. And I ended up closing my computer. To everybody listening tonight, whether you're on my side, and I don't want to say sides. This is all about learning. This is all about talking back and forth with our fellow man and learning off each other and listening to each other and respecting each other. You didn't hear that tonight. There was no slamming computers. There was no, hey, you're a moron, which tells you that this discussion needs to be continually talked about. Nobody is at the point where they're calling each other, and they shouldn't be. And if they are, then they're not honest debaters between is there a God or is there not a God? This is not like a flat Earth. There is good arguments on both sides, and I really hope John kind of agrees with me there. That's why I do these style debates with people like John, and Standing for Truth and Nephilim Free, and just certain Christians, young Earth creationists, with respect, because there are questions, and it's a different talk. And do you kind of agree with me, John, that that's why there's a little more respect, that we don't get into the, I know some atheists do this very hatefully, but I don't, because you made some really good points, and a lot of the Christians I speak to make really good points. And believe me, I go to bed thinking about this stuff for days. You know, it's not something that I just close the computer and say, hey, I won or lost. There's no winning or losing for me. It's all just go think about this and contemplate it and, you know, ponder it.
Well, I appreciate that sentiment, Mark. That's commendable. You guys had a wonderful, a very lengthy conversation about this stuff, and the cordiality of it was refreshing. I think we're going to wrap it up for the night. We've gone over, I know already. I think Standing for Truth wanted this thing to last about 35 minutes less than it did. But
it flew by. Wow, that was I got to say, that was a phenomenal discussion. I enjoyed every single minute of it. So did the audience. And as Mark pointed out, there's no reason why we can't, sit down and have nice, respectful, profitable discussions like this, because I think that's really important, and that's what we strive to do here on this channel. So to both John and Mark, phenomenal conversation. It is definitely one to remember. So I hope everybody gets a chance to watch it and learn from it, more importantly.
Thank you, Standing for Truth. Thank you, Nephilim Free, for moderating it, even though there was no hate flying back and forth, so you didn't have to get too involved. You didn't have to pull out your whip or anything, or your whistle. And thanks to John. I really do appreciate it. And like I said, I'm sure Standing for Truth, and you might even have my email as well. Please send me anything you can think of, and send me some correspondence. And I know Erica, too, is looking forward to possibly doing a 2-on-2, and she's a little more, well, not a little more, she's a lot more up on the biology end of things than me. So that would be an interesting conversation too. And again, just thank you so much, guys. I really enjoyed tonight. It's almost 2 a.m. here, so thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Actually, one thing you said, Neff, for the next debate you moderate, I want to see you with a whistle. And anytime
there you go.
Get another hand,
okay,
hear that whistle go off.
Okay, guys, we're going to close it down. Thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. Thanks to our debaters, Mark and John. Everybody have a pleasant evening. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Awesome.
Bye.